Hi, I'm Lillian, a third-year undergraduate student at the University of California, Riverside. My mentor is Dr. Jocelyn Perrong, and my PI was Dr. Sean Green. They both work at the Learning and Transfer Lab at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. My study is on measuring misinformation and if it can be explained by the Bayesian-Q combination. So why should we study misinformation? In 1995, there was a bombing incident in Oklahoma. The employees were questioned at the crime scene, but only one of the three employees had said with some confidence that they had seen two perpetrators. The other two employees had not mentioned seeing a second person. Later, however, when they were re-interviewed, they had claimed to seeing another person as well. This led to a costly and time-consuming hunt for an accomplice that did not exist. The witnesses later admitted that they had conversed with one another before being questioned again by the police. In many events, traumatic or non-traumatic, people look to others to confirm their experience, but this muddles the individual's memory of the event and can lead to more serious consequences like false accusations in court. Our memory is faulty. We often forget things and also tend to misremember things. The misinformation effect occurs when information that was not gathered at the event becomes embedded in our memory. This causes us to remember things that we vehemently believe were there but weren't. The misinformation effect can happen in many ways, but the most common is through memory conformity. This occurs because people are capable of influencing each other's memories. In traditional approaches, like the Loftus and Palmer study depicted, the misinformation effect is seen as a failure of memory. To interact with the world, the brain must optimize objects and events in its environment, which may be signaled by more than one cue. Optimal perception requires the brain to integrate redundant cues as efficiently as possible. In the Bayesian theory, the two cues are being combined are displayed as a probability distribution, which represents the noise around each of the cues. Its two components, the red curve and the blue curve, are shown below. The red curve is the acquired knowledge that we have, and the blue curve is the incoming sensory information. In this case, the red curve will demonstrate our original event, and the blue curve will demonstrate the misinformation event. The curve in the middle is the combined distribution, which is an optimal fusion of the stored knowledge and the current sensory information. For the purpose of our study, the purple curve is the participant's perception. And in the distribution shown, this happens when the original event and the misinformation are weighted equally, and there is a perfect combination of the two. In this distribution, the misinformation is seen as more reliable than the person's own memory, and the person's perception is pulled towards the misinformation rather than the event. In this distribution, the memory of the event is more reliable than the misinformation, and the participant's memory is pulled towards that distribution. There are also cases where the cues are seen as dissimilar and two different items rather than the same cue, and no combination may occur. As seen, the purple curve is right over the event rather than being pulled in any way towards the misinformation. This can also occur over the misinformation as well. So why are we using this approach? The Bayesian Q combination treats the misinformation effect as a sensible combination of our knowledge with outside sources. However, the combination can be only deemed as sensible if the prior information and the outside source is weighted properly. This is different to the traditional approaches that saw misinformation as a failure of memory. Additionally, our study has a better internal validity, although unlike the traditional approaches, it has a lower ecological validity. In these traditional approaches, where the methods have a better real-world application, there's a lesser internal validity because it can't be controlled where the participants are looking and what they're paying attention to. The study design has a lower ecological validity in that point, but we have a greater internal validity as we can control what the participants are looking at, as well as the magnitude of the misinformation, and also allowing us to study the underlying mechanisms. Here's a quick example of the survey that the participants are given. Here are the instructions that they will read. This is an example of the original event, the math filler, the misinformation event. In this trial, they're told that they're seeing a different participant's answer, and then they'll be asked to answer the question, where the letters were. In this situation, this is where the participant answered. So we made this stimulus through Qualtrics, which is an online forum that we can remotely distribute surveys. So there's a total of 54 trials that were given in a randomized order. 36 of these trials include the misinformation, where the participants saw the original event for 10 seconds. We're given a math filler. Then we're given one of two messages, and in each of the message, the trials were split into 3 blocks with 6 trials each, and they also saw this trial for 10 seconds, and then were asked to answer where they saw each of the 5 letters, numbers, or symbols. We also had 18 trials to determine the participants' baseline for memory, and they were also shown for 10 seconds only. By using this design that can be mathematically calculated, we can better study the magnitude of the misinformation and in the situations which it's strongest. So for the 1 block condition, the letters that were moved weren't moved very much. In the 2 block condition, they were moved a little bit more. In the 4 block condition, they were moved the most. To be able to compare the 6 conditions, we took the difference between the response and the misinformation and divided it by the misinformation distance. Since the space given to the participants is a 960 by 960 pixel grid divided into a 10 by 10 grid, in the 1 block condition, the difference would be divided by 96, 192 in the 2 block condition, and 384 in the 4 block condition. Doing this will give us a standardized score so we can compare the 6 conditions. Scores closer to 1 or beyond 1 are closer to the original event, and scores closer to 0 or beyond 0 are closer to the misinformation event. For example, an answer like the orange one, which is in the middle, will show up in the middle of our distribution. Any answers on the event will show above 1. Answers above the misinformation would be shown on 0. Answers beyond the event will be shown past 1. And any answers beyond the misinformation will be below 0. So, one of the questions we're asking is, can the strength of the misinformation effect be measured? As well as what factors affect the distributions, as if the type of misinformer, the distance of the misinformation, or the memory ability of the participant. So going a little more in depth into the factors. So is the misinformation effect from another participant more or less reliable than that of a computer? One explanation could be that the participant's memory for misinformation is considered more reliable because of the memory conformity phenomenon. Therefore, their answers will be pulled more towards the misinformation effect in that condition compared to in the computer condition. How are the cues combined differently? This is referencing the distance between the event and the misinformation. The closer that the 2 cues are, the response curve will more likely be in the middle since there's a greater likelihood of combination. The farther the 2 cues are, the less likely that there will be a combination of cues. The response will more likely be either over the event or the misinformation. How would the participant's own memory affect these distributions? We believe that those with better, more reliable memory should be less vulnerable to misinformation. So our results, for our statistical test, we used a non-parametric statistical test. Looking at the overall distribution of 15 participants, as we can see, there is a mode around the event. More people answered close to the event, and the Bayesian distribution shows this. And this is the participant versus computer condition, which is the message that they got when they saw the misinformation. We saw no significance, so this means that there was no difference between the answers between the two conditions. Moving forward, we have the misinformation distances of 1 block, 2 block, and 4 block. We saw that there was a significant difference between all three of the conditions, and looking at the Bayesian distributions, the 1 block had near perfect combination. The 2 block had the participants answering closer to the event, and the 4 block had a bimodal distribution where there was little to no combination, and the curves are over the event and the misinformation. And for the performance based on memory, we saw a significant difference between the reliable and unreliable memory. So this shows that participants with better memory appear to be less vulnerable to the misinformation effect. So our conclusions. By using a simplistic design, we were able to measure and compare the strength of the misinformation effect. In our study, except for the distribution of the 4 block, which was bimodal, and the 1 block where it was equally weighted, the paradigm followed the distribution where the event was weighted more than the information. We found no significance with the type of misinformer, but we were able to find significant differences with the distances of the misinformation and the two groups of the person's memory ability. For future research, we suggest making changes to the instruction condition to make it more believable, and we could better adjust the expertise of the misinformation condition to reflect real-world situations. We could also exaggerate the participants' memory ability to manipulate their confidence to test if there's a factor in the misinformation effect. Thank you everyone for coming to my talk, and thank you to my friends and family for supporting me, and thank you for PrEP for giving me this opportunity to do this study and to be a part of it.